Wendy Knowler is in studio with us, and Ernest has preempted the conversation a little
Naughty
bit.
Ernest.
Stealing Wendy's thunder. But we are going to bring you an update on the car safety story, which we have been following for some time now, as news broke just a little while ago of another very popular local car whose results on international crash testing left a lot to be desired. It's a slightly more complicated story this time than some of the previous ones, and we'll explain why.
Yes.
We'll also, I hope, have time for some open line calls later in the show. So if you do want to raise a consumer topic outside of the car discussion, please feel free to send it through in the meantime, either by WhatsApp to 072 567 1567 or by email to pippah@capetalk.co.za. And a second guest with us who we'll introduce properly in just a moment. But firstly, Wendy, always lovely to have you with us. Welcome back.
Great. Thank you, Pippa. Always good to be here.
And once again, we're asking the same question. Why should South Africans accept lower vehicle safety standards than motorists in other parts of the world? As I've mentioned, we've discussed this several times in recent months after international crash testing showed that a number of the vehicles that are in common use on South African roads don't offer enough protection to drivers and or passengers. And we're going back there today because of this breaking news on yet another test that is cause for concern. Wendy, over to you. Tell us more.
Okay, that's the latest popular South African car to score a shocking 0 stars for safety, and that's in terms of the Global New Car Assessment Program, or Global NCAP. The car was bought here anonymously, sent overseas, and crashed there. It is the Toyota Starlet, as we've learnt when the news broke at 1 o'clock. And so, starless, according to that test. And it means simply that the occupants face a huge risk of injury in the event of an accident. And yet, as you alluded to just now, the car is perfectly legal to be sold in South Africa in terms of our very woeful,
much weaker
outdated
safety standards.
Yes, so the same, if they wanted to sell the same car, which is manufactured in India, by the way, if they wanted to sell the same model in a different market, you name it, Australia, Europe, UK, America, they couldn't sell it there because it wouldn't have passed
wouldn't meet their minimum requirements.
No.
Okay.
So there are two things to consider here, and that is you've got the safety equipment, and then you've got the integrity of the body shell. So it's not just that I'm looking at what safety kit it has, but also the
structure of the car.
The structure of the car itself. How well would it withstand the forces that come to bear on it in the case of an accident? And also worth mentioning that the accident happens, it's a simulated 50 kilometer an hour head-on.
Okay.
Which is
quite mild considering the speeds that many people actually drive at.
It's quite typical, but also we do know that on our freeways the speeds are likely to be much higher. Okay, so it's the third car sold in South Africa which has scored 0 stars since Global NCAP launched its Safer Cars for Africa campaign with its partner, the Automobile Association of South Africa, 9 years ago, 2016.
Was that 2017?
17. Yes, of course, my maths. That would make it 9 years ago.
Yeah.
So first it was the Cherry QQ3 back, I think it was in the first testing, 2017. And then we had the Hyundai Grand i10 just 5 months ago, December, we spoke about that.
That's right.
And we'll get back to the Grand i10 in a bit.
And now the Starlet. Okay. So just a quick reminder, I mean, as you've already mentioned here, so the Safer Cars for Africa campaign buys the entry-level model in South Africa, so the version that is being sold as the cheapest option of that car.
The reasoning being that safety shouldn't be a sort of spec that's exactly that you have to pay more for.
Okay, and then they ship it over to the testing facility in Munich, near Munich in Germany. It's put through these global standard crash tests with dummies, so 2 adult dummies up front and 2 child-sized dummies in the back, obviously all fitted with sensors, etc., to give them feedback on what is happening to those so-called bodies during the crash. And I mean, the bottom line here, we're going to get into some detail with the AA on what this particular crash test on the Starlet showed. But what we find, as you've mentioned, Wendy, is issues not just around the safety equipment, but also the strength and structure of the body shell itself. So in fact, let me just bring in our second guest. It's a pleasure to welcome back again. And Bobby, I'm sorry we have to invite you back so often. I wish it was less often.
I too wish it was less often,
Better
particularly
news.
these circumstances.
Yeah, but Bobby is the CEO of the Automobile Association, Bobby Ramakwede, and as I said, a very familiar voice on this show because this is something of a recurring talking point that we need to keep on raising awareness of. Bobby, this case, as I mentioned, is not quite as clear-cut as some of the previous ones we've discussed. Do you want to just start there and explain why?
Yeah, so this one is more of a timing issue. So what I'm going to do is paint a picture and help the listener understand how the program works. Every year, we as the AA identify popular entry-level vehicles, and we buy these cars up anonymously, send them out to Germany to go through the GNCAP protocol. In this particular instance, the Starlet had been on sale since 2022 and went through a safety update in September of 2025. Now, we obviously bought the car pre that safety update.
Right.
But that said, a good 20,000 of these vehicles had been bought at the time, still making the test very relevant.
Yeah.
You've got vulnerable consumers and their families in these vehicles. So we tested the vehicle, and unfortunately, as you said, that vehicle failed by pretty much the entire scale. What Toyota has since done is upgraded this vehicle by equipping it with an additional 4 airbags. So that's a total of 6 airbags, 2 up front, 2 on the side, and 2 curtain airbags. That, because it happened so soon after our test, we've made a call to give the consumer some comfort by retesting the car.
With the new model.
With the new model.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we've bought up anonymously. Well, it's not so anonymous now, but they're off. We've anonymously bought up 2 of the current spec out in the market and sent them out to Germany. Of particular concern is the view from Toyota's side is that the vehicle that is outbound, the one that we tested, is termed to be obsolete. Now, if my manufacturer told me my car is obsolete, I'd be particularly concerned.
Okay, as you said, there are 20,000 of them on the roads in South Africa right now, so we can't call them obsolete. They're being driven on our roads by families every day.
They're saying the test data and results is factually obsolete. And
do you want to just quote? Because you've received some communication
well, not
from
me.
them. Okay.
You're happy for me to quote, Bobby?
Feel free.
The AA had this morning received a cease and desist notice from Toyota South Africa saying basically, don't publish any of this. And doing so would constitute wrongful, intentional, and malicious dissemination of defamatory content. Now, defamatory is a key word because in order for the claim or the charge of defamation to stick, something that is shared publicly needs to be inaccurate and not in the public interest. If it's 100% factual and in the public interest, a defamation claim will not
succeed. And I'm sorry, if there are 20,000 of them on the roads, that's definitely in the public interest.
And the AA is already... Well, maybe I should start with this before we can go through what the letter said, because it's a question I asked off air, and that is why, under the circumstances, why didn't you then wait until the current model was tested in Munich and then issue a report detailing the results of both? Because, I think we need to commend Toyota for, increasing the safety spec in the car.
Which they did in September, absolutely.
And they didn't bring it in as Hyundai did with the Grand i10 as a higher model at an extra cost. They replaced the base model. So they don't have a 2 airbag one and a 6 airbag one. The 2 airbag one is no longer being sold. So my question was, why didn't you wait and do it the 2-in-1? And
what's the response, Bobby?
And the answer to that question is, well, you've got 20,000 people in these cars. And I think they deserve to know the level of safety of the vehicle that they're in. In addition to that, we are not entirely convinced that the vehicle is safer by just introducing 6 airbags, given the structural weaknesses that we observed in the test. So we'd like to retest it and ensure that both of these vehicles can be looked at through the same lens, and we can give fair commentary on that. But the key component is that as the advocate for the consumer, the mobility consumer, it's our responsibility to make them aware of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bobby, so before I was going to say, maybe we should say what your test found. To obtain that 0 rating, and then we can talk a little bit more about the Toyota response.
Sure.
Right. So, in terms of airbags, obviously it only had 2 airbags. That's limiting the ability to which we could test the side impact. We do a side impact test. That left the occupants very vulnerable. The test that we can't do, because it didn't have curtain airbags, is the pole test. Now, that said, in the absence of a pole test, you automatically score a 2. The drop down from 2 stars to 0 was because quite a few of the structural components of the vehicle, this is the side, the B pillar, which is the part of the car that separates the 2 side windows, as well as the frontal impact, showed that the car could not withstand further loadings. We use the term further loadings, basically meaning that if the impact was slightly more aggressive, had a bit more force, a little bit more representative of a real-life crash, even more harm would be incurred by the occupants.
Okay, so that's the summary of what was found. And again, this is on the old model that was sold prior to September 2025.
Right.
And again, to emphasize, Toyota did introduce a new base level with 6 airbags in September 2025. So if you've bought one of those later models, the results that Bobby's just described don't necessarily apply to you. But if you're one of the many thousands driving the older model, obviously this information is incredibly important for you to know about. So Wendy, sorry to interrupt you like that, but
yes, I think I sort of half corrected Bobby by saying they said that the press release around the pre-September 2025 was, what did they say? That it was factually obsolete, but they actually do refer to the pre-September 2025 model as obsolete. The model assessed by the AA is from an obsolete model and not representative of the Starlet currently available in the South African market. The Starlet on sale locally has been significantly enhanced and complies with all applicable local regulatory requirements as well as Toyota's global safety standards. So did the old one. At Toyota, safety is fundamental and non-negotiable. Guided by our commitment to creating ever better mobility for all, we continuously invest in advanced safety engineering, robust structural design, and accessible in-vehicle safety technologies to prevent drivers, to protect rather drivers, passengers, and all road users. And again, so they're saying you've done this test on a model that we're no longer selling, so it's factually obsolete. The test is the information factual? Yes, it is. Are there 20,000 more or less? And as I say, that figure apparently, according to the AA, comes from Toyota in Japan.
Correct.
Are there 20,000 of them on the road as we speak in South Africa? Yes. So I think it would be very hard to argue that the information is not relevant, especially when you consider it together with the fact that the latest model is currently in the process of will be crash tested very soon.
I think it's worth adding that at the time of the test, that was the only model available in the market. So it was very relevant.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It just happens to be that there was a refresh a few months after we bought the vehicle and tested it.
And again, in fairness, that new refreshed model is also going to be put through the same testing.
Indeed.
And of course, we will share that feedback when we have it. If you are just tuning in, what you missed before the news break is the fact that the latest, we've spoken many times about the global NCAP car safety crash testing scenario and the results that are found when entry-level models of cars sold in South Africa are taken over to Germany and put through a crash test scenario. The latest to go through that test is a Toyota Starlet coming up with a 0-star rating. And just to emphasize again, this particular model had an upgrade in September of last year. So if you have bought a new Starlet in the last 7 or 8 months or so, if it was post-September 2025, you've bought a version which has additional safety features to the one that we are talking about right now that was crash tested. But we are still talking about it because there are around roughly 20,000 of the old model on the roads.
And
Wendy.
I think it's also relevant to say that there's a sort of feeding in so that I'm sure someone who was buying the 2 curtain airbag model at the time that the newer one was being fed and probably wasn't told that. So if you want to know for sure, you could get the car's VIN. I'm not going to say VIN number because VIN is vehicle identification number. So you get your VIN and go to any Toyota dealership and they will be able to tell you which version of the Starlet it is, or else as Bobby said earlier, the SRS marks the spot where an airbag is.
Okay.
So if you have one on the side, on the B pillar, that's the vertical pillar that separates the two side windows or doors.
Yep.
If you see an SRS there, then you're obviously in the latest model, which has 6 airbags.
Okay. And Varsha asking, does this refer to all Starlets? I'm in a Starlet Cross 2026. No, it does not apply to your car, Varsha. So it's a very particular model, entry-level model that we're talking about here. It's not the entire range. What about 9 or 10 people have pointed out and want to know about, Bobby, is the fact that the Starlet has a twin in the Suzuki badge range, namely the Suzuki Baleno.
Correct.
A lot of people saying, we've been told over and over again that the current Toyota Starlet is actually just a rebadged Suzuki Baleno. Does Suzuki have the same issue? Have you tested a Baleno? What can you tell us?
So it is a reskinned Baleno, or rather the Baleno is a reskinned Starlet.
Okay.
Vice versa. The reality of it is that we haven't tested it through Safer Cars for Africa, but Latin America NCAP has tested the Baleno for their territory. And I must emphasize that it was tested for their market. So there's a possibility that the vehicle in Latin America might have some variances to the ones that's sold in this market.
Okay.
But the result for that market was that it got a 2-star rating.
In Latin America.
In Latin
Okay.
America.
And those results, if you want to read them in detail, are available on the Global NCAP website?
Correct.
Okay. So, right. Let's get back to the Starlet and the one in question here. And Wendy, you did say you wanted to comment on the previous car which obtained a 0-star rating, the Hyundai Grand i10.
Yeah. So Hyundai responded at the time and since by saying that the car meets all South Africa's safety regulations, woeful as they are. The last 2 words are mine, 3 words. So they said, while we recognize, this is now Hyundai, while we recognize the role of independent organizations such as Global NCAP in advocating for improved vehicle safety, these assessments are voluntary, follow evolving protocols, and are not regulatory requirements in South Africa, because I know they had a problem with the fact that the criteria for the stars got stricter and affected, according to them, the fact, it impacted on the 0 result that they got. And then last month, and obviously it must be a direct result of, I've surmised it's a direct result of the 0 rating being made public. Hyundai announced that a new derivative of the Grand i10 would soon be introduced, offering additional safety features and providing customers with a greater choice in a highly price-sensitive segment. So the executive variant, which will be in addition to the range, not replacing the base model, which was rated 0 stars for safety.
Yeah.
The executive variant will have side and curtain airbags as well as traction control. The Starlet always had traction control.
It did.
So, but the Grand i10 didn't. So this executive model will have traction control, 2 extra sets of airbags. It obviously will cost more than the base model as a result. So it's good to see that, but ideally should have replaced the base model. They should have got away with it.
Well, to you, I mean, Mateus will be in agreement with you. He's just written in saying, I've long maintained that the top and bottom spec cars of the same range should have no difference in safety, yet you always find more safety features on higher end options within a range. Safety is supposed to be paramount.
Exactly.
Is his
so
comment.
Put better wheels, better finishes, better sound systems, all the bells and whistles, but let the safety be in all models. I mean, that just seems like a no-brainer. Yes, there is some cost attached, but in some cases not as much as you'd think. For example, traction control, according to the engineers at Global NCAP, is not a very expensive addition.
No.
Yeah.
At all.
Okay.
It's not. I must point out, though, when you compare the Grand i10 to the Starlet, one should commend Toyota for what they did in September.
Yeah.
Making the airbags, all 6 airbags, a standard feature
from the base model.
From the base model is
an
act of democratizing safety across the range. So kudos to them for that. We look out for the results of the next test.
Okay, so that, and again, so the upgraded model is being sent to Germany to go through the same process, and we will obviously share with you feedback once that newer model with more safety features has gone through the same process. So I think we've covered most of what we needed to. Wendy, just anything from NCAP itself that you'd like to mention about what they've said about what they observed in the Starlet test.
So Richard Woods, who's the CEO of Global NCAP, said this is a shocking 0-star result from Toyota. The Starlet, which is one of the most popular cars sold in South Africa, has an unstable body shell as well as poor head and chest protection, which are both a cause for serious concern. We have to stress there that the model that was phased out in September of 2025.
Yeah.
I think, Bobby, it's a pertinent question. What would you like to say to those 20,000 odd owners of the previous version of the Starlet that has been tested on hearing this news?
So I'd like to address a little bit more than just that audience. Those who own cars, those who are looking to buy cars, the dipstick that we've been advocating for is if a vehicle scores less than 3 stars, so that is 2, 1 or 0 stars, please do yourself a favor and stay away from it. Now, if you're in the unfortunate situation where you were none the wiser and bought a vehicle that was either a 2, 1 or 0 star car, to the extent that you can get yourself out of the vehicle, i.e. trade out of it, and need assistance in identifying a safer vehicle, we at the AA are available to you. Simply call us and we can have the conversation and steer you in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Excuse the pun.
Okay. As a matter of interest, I don't know if anybody at the AA tracks sales figures, but Bobby or Wendy, as far as either of you know, has a not great safety rating from one of these NCAP tests and the publicity that comes with it, like interviews like this one, made any impact on vehicle sales?
The answer is quite nuanced because I've explored this with Bobby off air. If you look at the straight figures, especially the Grand I-10, there's been very little change since. Well, let's not count December because that's when the news broke. Let's say this year. I haven't checked April, but I might have. But it's pretty solid. And I'm like, what are we doing this for? Do South Africans just not care about safety? Is it all about the price? It's like, whatever. I haven't had a crash yet, and I'm sure it'll be fine, sort of thing. But let's Bobby answer that. What's going on with the figures?
Here's the nuance. You've got 3 principal purchasers of cars. You've got the average man on the street, you and I. You've got governments who buy vehicles in large quantities. And then you've got fleets, i.e. rental car companies. Mm-hmm. So if we were to strip out the rental car companies and the governments, there's reason to be argued that we'd probably see a lot more variance in the number of vehicles bought subsequent to this announcement, suggesting that consumers are hearing it. But if they're not hearing it, we're saying it again, prioritize your safety.
Okay. So prioritize your safety, check, and if you are checking the star ratings, make sure you are checking the correct model, the version that is being sold in this country.
And if you're going to hire a car.
Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah. Ask those questions.
Indeed.
Okay.
You might be driving in an unfamiliar place, there's your risk is higher anyway. And you're going from Cape Town to Johannesburg, unfamiliar with the speed and the whatever, there's a greater chance that you'll have an accident.
Okay, so it's really worth asking the question and checking which vehicle you're being given and looking up the safety rating before you agree to take those keys and climb behind the steering wheel. Bobby, thanks so much for making time for us again.
Thanks
and thank you for, more importantly, for the work done to drive this message that we have got to prioritize safety and refuse to continue accepting that Africa is a dumping ground for less safe vehicles. And one hopes that one day we'll be having a different conversation that starts with government has announced a change to our safety minimum standards.
I could retire at that point.
I look forward to that conversation. May it be sooner rather than later. Bobby, thanks for joining us.
6-7.
That is the number you can dial if you've got a short-ish consumer query. In other words, not one that's going to take a lot of detailed digging, because we've got about 10 minutes in hand before we get to the end of the show. Wendy, before we take any consumer open line calls, though, you've got an interesting tuna story to share with us.
I have. So I got an email from Mike who said he bought 3 identical 170-gram tins of Cape Point shredded light meat tuna in vegetable oil. So the front of the label was identical, Cape Point being a ShopRite Group own brand.
Okay.
So you only found them in Cape Point.
In ShopRite and Checkers.
Sorry.
Yes.
Checkers and ShopRite. Yeah. They were all bought from Checkers in Pietermaritzburg, KZN. The interesting thing he wrote is that each has vastly different nutritional information on the label. For example, tin 1, 8.5 grams of saturated fat per 100 grams. Tin 2, 3.1, I mean, vastly lower. And tin 3 was 2.3 grams of fat per 100 grams. So that's a huge difference. I looked just quickly a minute or two ago. I compared the sodium. I compared the per tin. So it was per 55 grams. It ranged from 153 grams to 229 to 258. So 153 to 258. And I was like, what is going on? So I took this up with ShopRite. They wanted to see all the pictures of the cans and the batch numbers and everything else. And this is the answer that I got shortly, 10 minutes before coming on air from ShopRite. The products in question were sourced from different approved manufacturing partners while sold under the same private label and stock keeping unit. That's SKU for those in the industry, not in the industry. Each manufacturer follows its own validated recipe formulation and conducts independent, accredited nutritional analyses for labeling purposes. As a result, there may be variations in nutritional values, particularly for fat and sodium, depending on factors such as oil composition, brining methods, and processing techniques used by each supplier. While we appreciate that differences in nutritional labeling on products may appear identical, that appear to be identical may be confusing for customers, the information on each tin accurately reflects its contents and is supported by accredited lab testing. I think a normal, reasonable expectation of a consumer is you buy the product once, you look at the ingredients, the nutritional breakdown, if you are trying to limit your sodium salt intake, for example, or your fat intake. And then you write, okay, this is great. And then you keep buying it, but you're not looking because you have a reasonable expectation that it will be the same.
As it was the last time.
So if you're buying Cape Point tuna and you are particularly conscious or concerned about, but let's stick with salt and fat content, do compare the labels.
Check and
you might find it was this is the other thing. It was a buy 3 special. I think you got 3 for
the price of
72 rand. Did Mike, which is quite common in Checkers, and so they're interspersed on the shelf. I just found that fascinating. All my years, I've never come across that issue.
Different suppliers making the same product under the same badge,
but differently.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
Yeah. So it's not all tin tuna is the same, even if the label suggests that it is, or the front of the label. The back of the label tells you a different story.
Every time. Thanks. Yeah. Well, thank you for flagging it.
Thank you, Mike.
Very interesting question in from Tony. And there's been a lot of conversation on social media platforms around the poor delivery drivers out on the roads in weather like we've had. And Tony writes to me to say, I was pleased to see a message from Woolies Dash that they suspended deliveries during the storm out of concern for driver safety. I was just wondering whether the CPA allows any leeway around brand promises that can't be delivered due to circumstances beyond the control of the company. For example, not meeting a promised delivery deadline due to weather. He goes on to say, one hopes most people would be understanding, but I think he's right in saying there's always that one person who takes a chance and tries to make a buck off it. I'm curious whether the CPA actually speaks to the issue.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And also, I mean, it would be an issue of worker safety and what's the word I'm looking for, well-being or whatever. I actually found out in the middle of the storm on Monday, and I must stress, I must say I'm quite judgy of people who don't want to get in their own cars, but in a terrible weather, and then I shouldn't be, because maybe there'll be a day that I need to. But I went onto the 6060 app just to check an address, to be completely honest. I wasn't going to make an order. Place an order. It was really the worst of the storm, and that's when I saw they had suspended theirs already on Monday morning. I think they were the first, and it's
so they also suspended.
In Eastern and Western Cape. And I said, I queried it with ShopRite straight away, and they said, yes, we've done this. And I said, they didn't answer the second part of my question, which was, has this ever happened before? Because I don't remember a time.
Yeah.
And but maybe, I mean, I don't go onto the app when it's terrible weather normally. And they said, they didn't want to rule out it never happened, but it's very, very seldom.
Okay. So Tony,
can
yes,
you imagine?
It's the right thing to do, but does the CPA actually say anywhere?
No, it doesn't. But I wouldn't rate your chances if you wanted to
try and bring a claim,
because it would be a force majeure thing, and I think if one of their drivers, if they forced their drivers to work and they were, being washed away and injured, or, God forbid, worse, then they would have a much bigger case to answer for, I would say, if you're forcing someone to work under those conditions.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. Okay. And then this is I think we can squeeze this in because it's I suspect going to be a dead easy answer. But
so.
Palesa wrote in to say she had bought a baby hat at Pep. Was very happy, labelled price of £24.95. She bought a whole lot of different items. So she said she only noticed when she got home that she had actually been charged £29.95 for the item when she looked at the slip that evening. And her question is it just my bad luck for not checking in store, or do I have the right to go back and demand the advertised price? And then she puts up here, she says, not that I'm actually going to go back for a difference of £5. The parking would cost more than I'd receive as return, but I'm wondering on principle, is her comment.
Yeah, certainly if she can prove, and I mean, I would imagine it's within hours that the shelf price said, what was it, 24 Rand?
24.95.
So
yeah.
let's call it 25 Rand, and she was charged an extra 5 Rand, which the slip revealed, then absolutely it would be a very foolish manager who wouldn't put that right for her. But ideally, you should be wide awake at the till and raise it there. You would be entitled to the lower price. If you were standing in a Pick n Pay or a Woolworths store, you'd be eligible for their own compensation in terms of their own voluntary compensation policy. It's not a legal thing, so
Yeah.
We won't go into it. But there's additional compensation, and it works also as an incentive for the stores to make sure they're synchronizing shelf prices with
what's
till
loaded
prices.
on the tills. Yeah. Okay. Well, Palesa, if nothing else, thank you for the reminder to all of us to check slips while you're in the store. We'll leave it there with just a reminder that if you want to raise a consumer issue with Wendy Knowler, the best thing to do is go onto her website, wendyknowler.co.za, and that is spelled KNOWLER, and fill out the contact form there because it has been designed to generate all of the required information from you in one go. You do still have the option of sending an email to consumer@knowler.co.za. We ask that you please just remember to put the words CapeTalk in the subject line and a word or two about the nature of the problem. Wendy, thanks so much. We'll chat again next week.
Indeed. Thanks, Pippa.